Have you ever been so sure you were right? So confident in your own abilities that you believed you didn't need help from anyone? It's a powerful feeling, this self-reliance. We tell ourselves, I can do this on my own. We plan every step. We prepare for every challenge we can imagine. And for a while, this feeling of control serves us. It pushes us to achieve great things, to climb our own personal mountains. But what happens when the path changes, when the unexpected arrives? Do we still trust only in ourselves, listening only to the echo of our own voice? I want to share a story with you. It's about a man, a very skilled mountain climber. He was known for his strength, his courage, and his incredible determination. This climber had decided to conquer one of the world's highest peaks, and he was going to do it alone. He trained for years, meticulously mapping out his route and preparing his gear. He believed in his own power, his own experience. He felt he didn't need a team or a guide. His own skill was all the company he needed. He was so focused on the summit, so sure of his plan, that he couldn't imagine anything going wrong. As he began his ascent, everything went exactly as he had planned. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and his body felt strong. With each step upward, his confidence grew. He would pause, look down at the world shrinking below him, and feel a surge of pride. He felt gratitude, but it was a gratitude directed at his own hard work, his own discipline. He was the master of his own destiny, the architect of his own success. He was proving to the world, and to himself, that he was enough. He didn't need to rely on anyone or anything but his own two hands. But here is where the story takes a turn. As the day wore on, other climbers who were descending warned him. "Turn back," they said. "A storm is coming. The conditions are changing. It's not safe to continue alone." The climber simply smiled and thanked them for their concern, but he didn't listen. In his mind, their warnings were just noise, just doubts he didn't have time for. He was so close to his goal. Why would he turn back now because of what someone else thought? He was determined to reach the top, no matter what. He trusted his own judgment over the wisdom of others. The climber pushed forward, ignoring the darkening clouds that were gathering above him. The wind began to pick up, and it no longer felt like a gentle breeze. It started to howl, carrying whispers of the warnings he had so easily dismissed. He had planned for challenges, of course. He had trained in difficult weather, but this felt different. The temperature dropped suddenly, and a thick, disorienting fog rolled in, swallowing the path ahead. He could no longer see the summit he was so desperate to reach. In fact, he could barely see his own hands in front of his face. His confidence began to waver, just a little. He told himself it was just a temporary setback. He was an expert, after all. He knew how to handle this. He would just find a safe place to wait it out. But as he tried to secure his position, his foot slipped on a patch of unseen ice. He tumbled down a short, steep incline, his gear scattering around him. The fall wasn't far, but it was enough to leave him shaken and completely disoriented. The sun had now set and the world around him was plunged into an absolute, suffocating darkness. The silence was broken only by the menacing roar of the wind. The pride he had felt just hours before was gone. It was replaced by a cold, creeping fear that started in the pit of his stomach. He was alone, truly alone. Not in the powerful, independent way he had intended, but in a vulnerable, terrifying way. He had no one to call out to, no one to help him find his way. The mountain that had seemed like a glorious challenge now felt like a monster, waiting to claim him. He had believed he was in control, but he realized now that he had never been in control at all. His training, his maps, his strength, none of it mattered in this pitch-black freezing void. He was lost. He tried to move, but he was tangled in his ropes, his body aching and cold. Panic set in. He thought about his family, his life, everything he would lose. He had been so sure of himself, so certain he could conquer this mountain. But now, the mountain was conquering him. His self-reliance had led him to this point of absolute despair. He had trusted himself completely, and it had led him to a place where he was about to give up. Imagine the feeling. The biting cold seeps into your bones, and the darkness is so complete, it feels like a physical weight pressing down on you. This was the climber's reality. Every minute felt like an hour. The hope that had powered his ascent was now just a distant memory. He was suspended in the middle of nowhere, hanging by a rope, with a vast, empty abyss below him. He couldn't see the ground. He couldn't see the sky. He was trapped between what was and what could be, and both were terrifying. He shouted for help, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. There was no one to hear him. In that moment of total isolation, he understood the true meaning of being alone. His ego, his pride, his self-belief, all the things that had defined him crumbled into dust. They offered no warmth, no comfort, no hope. He was just a small, fragile human being dangling on the side of a massive, indifferent mountain. He had pushed away every offer of help, every piece of advice, believing he knew better, and now, he was paying the price. He began to think that this was the end. He had no more strength to fight. The cold was making him drowsy, and a strange sense of peace started to wash over him. It was the peace of surrender, the peace of giving up. He closed his eyes, ready to let go. He had tried his best, he told himself. He had come so far, but in the deepest part of his heart, he knew he had made a terrible mistake. His entire journey had been driven by his own will, and it had led him straight into this inescapable darkness. It was in this moment of absolute desperation, on the very edge of giving up, that he remembered something from his childhood. He remembered the simple prayers his grandmother had taught him. He hadn't thought of them in years. He had always been a man of action, not a man of faith. But now, with nothing left, no strength of his own to rely on, he did the only thing he could. He looked up into the blackness, and with all the sincerity he had left in his broken spirit, he called out, "God," he cried, "if you are real, save me." In the crushing silence that followed his desperate plea, a voice answered. It wasn't a loud, booming voice from the heavens. It was a calm, clear voice that seemed to come from within him, yet it was not his own. The voice asked a simple, profound question. "What do you want me to do?" The climber, startled but clinging to this sliver of hope, cried out again, "Save me! Save me, God!" He was expecting a miracle. Perhaps the storm would suddenly stop. Perhaps a helicopter would appear out of the darkness. He was waiting for a grand, visible rescue. The voice spoke again, just as calmly as before. It said, "Cut the rope you are holding on to." The climber was stunned. Cut the rope? The rope was the only thing keeping him alive. It was the one thin thread connecting him to the mountain, the only thing preventing him from falling into the black abyss he couldn't see. To cut the rope was suicide. It was the most illogical, insane instruction he could possibly imagine. It went against every instinct for survival, every bit of his training as a climber. "Cut the rope?" he yelled back into the darkness, his voice filled with disbelief and anger. "You want me to cut the rope? Do you want me to die?" He couldn't understand. He had asked for help, for salvation, and the answer he received was a command to do the one thing that would surely lead to his death. His mind raced. Was this a test? Was it a cruel joke? He had finally reached out for a power greater than himself, and that power was asking him to abandon the very last thing he was clinging to for safety. He held on tighter to the rope, his knuckles white. The fear of letting go was far greater than his faith in the voice he had heard. He had asked for God's help, but he wasn't willing to trust God's plan. He wanted to be saved, but on his own terms, in a way that made sense to him. He wanted a rescue that he could see and understand. The idea of letting go, of trusting in something unseen, was simply too terrifying. And so, he chose to ignore the voice. He chose to hold on to what he knew. He chose to trust his fear over his faith. The next morning, a rescue team was sent out to search for the missing climber. The storm had passed, and the sun was shining brightly on the fresh snow. It didn't take them long to find him. They found him frozen to death, still clutching tightly to his rope. He was dangling just 10 feet off the ground. 10 feet. He had been so close to safety, so close to solid ground, but he couldn't see it. The darkness and his fear had convinced him that he was hanging over a deadly, bottomless canyon. He had held on all night believing his rope was his only salvation. But in reality, it was his attachment to the rope and his refusal to let go that had sealed his fate. If he had only trusted the voice, if he had only had the courage to cut the rope, he would have fallen a short, safe distance. He would have landed on a wide, stable ledge. He would have survived the night. He would have seen the sunrise. His tragic end wasn't caused by the storm or the fall. It was caused by his inability to trust in a plan he could not see. This story speaks directly to our hearts, doesn't it? How many of us are like that climber? We say we trust in a higher power. We say we have faith. But are we really living that way? Or are we clinging tightly to our own ropes, our fears, our need for control, our plans, our ego? We pray for help, but we want that help to arrive in a way that we can manage and understand. We are afraid to let go of what feels safe, even if that very thing is what's holding us back, keeping us frozen in place. So I ask you today, what is the rope you are holding on to? Is it a fear of failure? A need to be right? A relationship that no longer serves you? A plan that you refuse to change? True faith is not just believing in words. True faith is in action. It is the courage to let go of the rope when the voice of wisdom tells you to, even when you are scared. It's trusting that even if you fall, you will land on solid ground. Real faith isn't about seeing the outcome, it's about letting go of fear and trusting the journey, one step at a time.